now what we are witnessing right now is maybe the transformation of power peacefully, because from the Afghan government side, they have no capability, especially military capability, to resist the peaceful transformation of the political power. But in the future, as you say, Zhongshi, there may be some kind of uncertainties. There may be some kind of a crisis, especially after the transformation of power, especially after the establishment of the transitional government in the future. Especially when we look at what is happening in Kabul, there was still a lot of refugees, and still a lot of the military personnel that they should be settled, and how to persuade them to put down weapons and join the government. A lot of things that still full of uncertainties and still full of instability factors inside the country. So yes, the transformation period may be peaceful, but there will be some kind of challenges ahead inside Afghanistan.
The Western powers that are now evacuating their personnel out of Kabul and out of Afghanistan. They can't get out of Afghanistan fast enough right now. They don't have the time or the space to think about what they're leaving behind. But when they do have time, when they come around to look at the trail of destruction left behind by this war, how will they review the situation? How will they look at a Afghanistan possibly taken over again by the Taliban?
Yes, you are right, it's the Western power. They are still witnessing very closely what is happening inside Afghanistan. But the problem is that it's kind of the failure, which is a kind of a disappointment for them, because I don't think any of them can predict that the situation transferred so fast and so quickly. After the domination of the Afghan Taliban, they dominate the government in the future. Especially what we are witnessing here is the kind of the transformation of political power. I think the Western countries and the Western powers, they will also readjust their attitudes towards Afghanistan. Right now, they have to do something to facilitate the cooperation with Afghan Taliban and the new maybe possible transformation government to help them withdraw their diplomatic staff, to withdraw their military staff. But in the future, I don't think there will be very close ties between the new government and the Western powers. And the Western power, I don't think they will come back, because they have already realized that they cannot influence significantly of the country, and the withdrawal has already shown their attitude that they don't want really get involved too much to the country. They just want to leave Afghanistan. They just want to leave the affairs behind and forget about them.
To get more analysis into the situation, let's speak to Pavel Felgenhauer, a defense analyst based in Moscow. Pavel, great to have you on Zoom in this hour. Let's look at the strength comparison between the two warring sides. The government should have been able to gain control and stabilize the country. Even Washington said Taliban's takeover of Kabul was not inevitable. And now, fast forward to today and what we see on the ground there in Kabul, what exactly went wrong with the Afghan security forces?
Quite a number of Russian experts on Afghanistan, and we still have good experts since we spent all the 80s, 10 years fighting in Afghanistan and trying to impose a kind of communist socialist government on Afghanistan. So these specialists were saying that the Afghan National Army and police and security forces don't have a chance, that they're going to collapse. And these include the Russian Foreign Ministry, which was actually building Russian foreign policy based on this assumption, which turned out to be true. There is a problem in Afghanistan that Afghans are primarily, most of them, members of a tribe, religious national group, and Afghans only second. And this, when the Americans were building the National Army and Security Forces, they tried to build a kind of universal armed force, and not to build tribal forces, because that could tear the country apart. But as a result, these forces don't have the real morale or the actual desire to defend, say, areas where their tribe is not living. It's something like the situation in Lebanon, where there is a Lebanese national army, but everyone knows it's supported by Western countries, by Russia actually supplying arms. Everyone knows if it comes to fighting, they're not much at all. It's the Hezbollah, it's the Sunnis, it's the Christians, militias. They are the real fighters. And so it's more or less the same thing in Afghanistan. It was a wrong concept to build a national force, like as if it's some kind of Germany or, I don't know, even Iran, maybe something, or something more, a country with a much more coherent national identity. In Afghanistan, that doesn't work. Afghanistan, like Lebanon, was always a collection of different tribal religious groups and which balance each other. And that's the only way, apparently, Afghanistan continues to work. So the Afghan National Army was equipped, it was trained, but it didn't have the will to fight or the desire. The Taliban had the will and the desire to fight. They're driven by ideology. They want to build an emirate based on a strict adherence to Sharia law.
Pavel, was it just the will and the desire on the side of Taliban that brought them to those advances and brought them to where we see them today? Because the Taliban isn't exactly a centralized, a meticulously organized organization. What do you think that was their strategy in terms of capturing ground in Afghanistan, push into major cities, push into the capital, Kabul?
Well, there was some fighting in the beginning of their offensive and some resistance, especially from special forces of the Afghan National Army. The Taliban mostly employed negotiations. They negotiated not, of course, with the government in Kabul, but they negotiated with local tribal leaders. They apparently paid bribes to government officials and governors and commanders and offered them security that they will not be punished after the takeover. And that was a very effective tactic, too. There's also some rumors that the Pakistani intelligence was somehow involved. They kind of closely worked with the Taliban. And put together, this was a very successful strategy, tailored to the real Afghan situation, where the Americans were trying to build a Western-style democracy with the Western-style parliament and military that apparently is not very suitable for the present Afghan situation.
Pavel, what is your assessment on what happens next? Just yesterday, President Ashraf Ghani called for a national mobilization of militia forces to fight the Taliban. Now the Taliban is either on the skirts of Kabul or have entered Kabul, depending on different reports we're getting right now. What can the government do from this point?
Well, the Ghani government most likely can't do nothing much right now. For the time being, the eventual takeover of Kabul is inevitable, though most likely the Taliban will not be pushing much forward because there's American 82 Airborne Division coming in force, which will tell them that if you move, you might be wiped out. And they don't want that. They don't want to take on the Americans, which are leaving anyway. It doesn't make sense, and they'll not do it. So most likely there's going to be this kind of hung-up situation in Kabul for the next couple of weeks, with a kind of joint control of the city, the Americans from one side and the Taliban on the other, trying most likely to avoid open confrontation, though there could be some fighting between them. Maybe if say some kind of elements of ISIS try to make some kind of explosion and Americans retaliate, that maybe try to kind of provoke a fight between the Americans and the Talibs. But basically the Talibs and the Americans right now don't want to fight each other. They want to, Americans want to evacuate, the Taliban want to take over, and they know the Americans by 1st of September will be gone anyway. And so that's going to and then we're going to have Afghan Emirate, very backward, poor country from where most educated Afghans will leave, as they did after the Russian withdrawal in 89, 90. The country will lose a lot of its human potential. It's going to be most likely a pariah state. It's not clear right now. What will be the American policy in the region? Will the United States try to establish, it's known, Russia is going to try its best to establish working relationship with the Taliban. Russian embassy is not evacuating at all. But what will the Americans now do? They apparently don't have a strategy what to do next. They'll have to be scratching their heads. But and that will determine a lot in the neighborhood, because, well, the Americans may have lost Afghanistan, but they're still the major power, and they have the money and they have the forces, and they're going to right now have to sit down and think what they do next.
Pavel, we appreciate your analysis at this moment. Pavel Felgenhauer, a defense analyst based in Moscow. Thank you so much.